Hi, folks. Pastor Mike Spalding here with my good friend and big brother.
I'm Pastor Casper, and we're here together to encourage you to keep listening to Deception Detection Radio, because we're both on this network with our individual shows.
Yes,
and
yes.
we're going to be doing some things together as well. Nudge, nudge, say no more.
Hey, folks, tune in Deception Detection Radio. Some of the best programming in Christian talk, news, encouragement, and Bible studies. God bless you.
God bless.
In the sky, gazing far into the night, I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week. The world we live in is incredibly dark and wicked, and becoming more so by the day. Main news sources can't be trusted because they are almost all owned by the elite, the wicked ones creating the darkness. Tonight, we bring you the truth, and to help us do that is author, researcher, fellow talk radio host, friend, and brother in Christ, Johnny Cirucci. Well, welcome back, Johnny. It's been a little bit. It's great to have you joining us.
Okay, it is an absolute pleasure. Chad, I didn't realize that we weren't connected. Chad, we are now connected, my friend.
Yeah, I just realized that. I had to look your name up, though.
Yeah, no, it's good. Very, very pleased to be back because we have had some great conversations and more than a few that have been interrupted by technical difficulties. So I'm pleased that we're giving this another try.
Oh, every time we try to set up, something happens. It's pretty much expected now.
Yeah, right. So weird, but great conversations, and I'm not going conspiratorial. I'll just say it's weird how that happens.
Yes. Okay, let's see. Boy, I'm just drawing blanks today. Is this Monday?
That's okay. I had an unusual afternoon coffee, so I'm feeling where you're at.
Maybe that's what I need is some coffee. Would you like to do the opening prayer for us, Johnny?
It would be my honor as a 25-year born-again Christian. Open up and say, Lord, please put your hand on this conversation and this information get to those who need. We are doing what we feel is our calling in Jesus Christ, and that is to speak his truth. And by speaking his truth, to draw people to him. And we just ask that you give us your guidance and your help through the power of the Holy Spirit as in everything. And I ask this in the name of our Savior, your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you, Johnny. Before we get started, can you please let everyone know where they can listen to you and where they can get your books, because I have been contacted so many times because people want to tune into your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, I was doing podcasting a lot, and it was actually taking a lot out of me because I'm attention to detail oriented, kind of an obsessive compulsive guy, and so I was digging, searching the internet for sound clips, and it would take me a week just to do a single podcast. And I have no advertisers, and I have no so I was, all right, this is not cost effective, although I really enjoyed and the fact I enjoy listening. It's Resistance Rising on Blog Talk Radio. You can also catch, I've got over 180 podcasts already done, so if you haven't seen them, you're more than welcome to go and get them at my website, johnnycirucci.com, JohnnyCirucci. Johnny is a nickname. Giovanni is my real first name. And so you can see the podcast button across the top menu there. However, for the up-to-date stuff, I am now working on a backup channel. YouTube deleted my main channel because there are mass shootings. No gore, profanity, no pornography. But that's channel, and that's okay. It wasn't necessary. Found reasons to delete my main anyway. And so I now have a Resistance Rising backup channel on YouTube and have been doing a lot of live streaming to catch up on the stuff I would usually do a podcast about. And, of course, I also have articles at johnnycirucci.com. I have 3 books, Illuminati Unmasked, Secret History, and Eaters of Children. And fortunately, Amazon has put all 3 of them together. I foolishly went with my full name on the third one, my nickname on the first 2, Johnny, and Giovanni Cirucci on the Eaters of Children. Unfortunately, Amazon is still linking all 3 books together, but that's where you can get them. And so that's it. Websites, podcasts, live streaming mostly right now for the audio stuff, and books. So that's how. Of course, you can write me at johnnycirucci.com, and I promise you I will write you back, which is unfortunately an unusual experience for many of us in public positions. I have a lot of, oh, Johnny, you actually wrote me back. I wrote to so-and-so and so-and-so, and they just ignored me. Well,
hey, Johnny, real quick, wanted to ask you, is there any adult language in any of the podcasts?
Yeah, good call. Listen, I am a fleshly Christian. I will tell everybody up front and personal. I apologize for my I'm Italian. People say, stay calm. I can't stay calm. I'm Italian. So I'm a former Marine, a former soldier, and a fleshly Italian. So I allow myself to get heated in my podcast, but of course you are not going to get anything like this in a professional. I'm thoroughly disciplined. You're not going to hear any kind of course, and I never take the Lord's name in vain. Just every once in a while, and we'll put out a 4-letter word every here and again. But I have found that because I am flawed, people sometimes acknowledge, hey, you know what? The guy's got flaws. Hey, he's a real person, which is nice to hear. And other times, people give it a little bit too much emphasis and seek to make a bigger deal out of, meanwhile, we have children, we have abortion, we have children being slaughtered, we have children being slaved and sex trafficked. It's just oddly how sometimes people can fail to get perspective on what's really important. Yes, I am a fleshly Christian. I am a flawed Christian. I'm not perfect. I'm forgiven. The question is, what is it that we all do as Christians? Are any of us perfect Christians? Now, we all have flaws. Some of them are not as easy to see or easy to hear as, saying doo-doo or pee-pee or something like that. But it's interesting that how it comes up in conversation. So the podcast, oh, by the way, I bleep myself. I meticulously edit out any bad language in the podcast. I can't do that on a live stream, but I'm pretty. I have self-control. I know not to get too. Every once in a while, I will have a meltdown. I'll get very upset over something, but that's just me. It's not easy being me.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up in case any of the listeners out there that go and jump on there,
Sure.
They got young children walking around that they might want to make sure they're not in the room whenever they're checking out your podcast.
Again, the podcast is I do meticulously, and every once in a while I'll miss one, but I meticulously bleep any coarse language, so it shouldn't be too over the top. And on the live streams, they're not. I have self-control. I'm not out of control. I just let's call it PG-13. Call it PG-13.
Well, you're passionate about Christ, and that comes through your broadcast loud and clear. And the truth does too. Today we're going to cover a few different topics. A lot has been going on in the news. And as you said, when someone writes to you, you write back, and you're great at that. Your timing, you don't waste time. But let's start out with Kavanaugh.
You bet. And okay, I'll add. I like to reference the sinful woman in Luke 7. That although she sinned much, she loved much, and so not that that's an excuse, but if you put yourself wholeheartedly into something, and there's nothing more important than following Christ, there will be a reward for it. And I'm not perfect; we're forgiven. So,
amen.
Yeah, Brett Kavanaugh. I think his middle name is Kevin. So Brett Kavanaugh is Michael. I'm sorry, Brett Michael Kavanaugh. This a complete psyop from beginning to end. I would say they. So let me back up. Who is they? I am absolutely convinced from my research, and that's one of the things I'm very proud of. Kay, is my books copiously cited, as are my articles. It's a little bit easier to do it in an article. I just embed a hyperlink. And if you go to johnnycirucci.com, I hope that's what you'll be impressed by, is that every article, certainly the recent articles, have many hyperlinks to sources the average person would respect. I'm very careful with my language there. The New York Times, the Washington Post, even the Daily Kos. I don't discriminate because, as far as I'm concerned, all of the sources are controlled, but they know they gain legitimacy by allowing portions of the truth to come out. And that's what happened with Kavanaugh. They selected him from the very beginning. Prior to the mysterious death of Antonin Scalia, the Supreme Court consisted of 6 Roman Catholics and 3 what I call token far-left Jews. That is the perfect dichotomy of power anywhere in the world, with a minor variation in Hollywood, where the Jews that are there, and I want to back up real quick, is in October 1307, with the suppression of the Templars, they were hunted down by Philippe le Bel of France. And I think the Vatican learned a valuable lesson from this suppression of the Templars, never to allow their skullduggery to be done in open. Philippe also forced the Vatican. Philippe is the only ruler I know of to subvert the Vatican wholly and completely. He moved the Vatican from Rome to Avignon in France and suppressed the Templars. Wow. There's no one I know of in before or since who has been able to put the Vatican under their thumb, and it didn't last very long. 70 years later, the Vatican moved back to Rome, and the Templars were replaced by various papal orders. Eventually the Dominicans and eventually the Jesuits overtook the Dominicans. So they like to empower particularly Jews because it's easy to froth up either love or hatred over Jews in Israel. And so you will see this as a tactic very often. And people, it's the easiest thing that I've seen happen to derail an intelligent conversation, Kay and Chad, is for someone to get in and froth up either love or hatred about Jews. Meanwhile, you're not trying to do that. You're trying to get to the bottom of a conspiracy. But someone will invariably jump in and say, it's the Jews. And people will just lose their mind because emotion takes over and disconnects from logical thought. And this is done on purpose. So I like to say that the true relationship between the two is exactly as it was at the crucifixion. You had a handful of traitor Jews in leadership positions crawling to their oppressors, that it was more important to murder a popular rabbi and betray the people than it was to allow that rabbi to threaten their power. And that's exactly what it is through to this day. You have a handful of token Jews. When you go out into the blogosphere, who do you see is one of the biggest demonized enemies within so-called alternative media truth seekers, George Soros. And what a perfect example George Soros is. George Soros told 60 Minutes, CBS 60 Minutes, he admitted that he and his father helped the Nazis confiscate the property of imprisoned Jews. And he also said it was the happiest time of his life. How perfect that he would become the boogeyman for alternative right, alternative media truth seekers and so forth. Perfect example of what I'm saying. So back to Brett Kavanaugh, I guess. I mean, was there a question I didn't answer in between that and Brett Kavanaugh? Okay, well, forgive me.
No, you're doing great. Keep going.
Okay, so back to Brett Kavanaugh. This is all a psyop from the very beginning. They intended. Oh yeah, so this is the makeup of the Supreme Court. That's why I went down on that little rabbit trail to describe the makeup of the Supreme Court. There are few bodies that are as important for the Vatican to control than the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court literally dictates law from the bench with zero accountability to the citizenry. As this process already showed us, how do the citizens interact? Lifetime appointment for a Supreme Court justice. How do you get a Supreme Court justice off the bench? I guess you impeach them. I'm pretty sure the process had to go through the United States Senate, and I can't remember the last time a Supreme Court justice was impeached. Can't be within this century, I'm sure. Basically, when someone gets on the Supreme Court, it is the perfect place to canalize or chokehold tyranny. And as an example, some of the most outrageous laws have been dictated to the American people by the Supreme Court. They're not really laws, but they're considered as such thanks to judicial review, a power fabricated by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall. Anywhere from illegal alien anchor babies was a footnote in a Supreme Court decision, through the ludicrous idea that pornography is constitutional, through the even more, forgive me, it's a Christian audience, so I don't want to over-spiritualize, satanic idea that the slaughter of the unborn through all 3 trimesters is the law of the land because the Supreme Court says it is. And then beyond that, you can extend the outrages to the federal judiciary below it, the appellate courts, the appeal courts, the circuit courts, who have dictated for states all across the country that homosexuals can be married and recognized by law and will be, and you have no choice in the matter. And frequently when good citizens try to rise up and say, we do not recognize the marriage of homosexuals, and this is not to be confused with the outrageous extremism of provocateurs that go to the like I say, outrageous extreme of overt hatred. Sin is sin. Homosexuality is no different than being addicted to porn online or fornication or theft or lying. It's all sin. But how often have we seen, I will bet you, I haven't done the research on this, but I will bet you that we now have homosexual marriage. I know it's been done here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania not too long ago, and it was done by a federal judge. How many times have federal judges, I would say the majority of the states in this country, homosexual marriage is now legal. And this is where it runs directly into a criminal conspiracy, Kay and Chad. This tyranny of the federal judiciary recognizes homosexual marriage. Then married homosexuals are now legitimized in the eyes of adoption agencies. That opens the door to homosexuals adopting children. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Children adopted by homosexual couples are at much higher risk of abuse. And I will dare say, I'm a layman, I'm not a doctor, but I will dare say it's pretty much guaranteed that they will have emotional abuse. At the bare minimum, a child that is brought up in a family of 2 women or 2 men, particularly 2 men, where the interaction of those 2 men is really, I mean, I'm not going to describe it, but How does a couple of the same gender show affection or intimacy with each other? You can't just explain it. It's an unnatural act, and I'm not going to hammer this because I don't want to give fuel for those who take this to an unfortunate extreme to often to mislabel Christians as hate mongers. It's just a fact of our belief system based on the Bible that it's unnatural, and unfortunately I have found in my research that particularly two men who the government recognizes as married are a terrible thing to inflict upon a child. And I know of an example. I like to cite former Seattle Mayor Ed Murray, who was also almost a Jesuit priest. Ed Murray is married in the Episcopal Church, adopted a little boy and raped him. He and his partner. And unfortunately, this is what you set up children for when your government, when your judiciary claims they have the power to recognize homosexuals as married couples. And this is all part of a terrible insurgency. And this Brett Kavanaugh thing is all part of it. So nothing tells you more overtly who rules the world and why the world is so evil. It's the Catholic Church. It's the Vatican. And they knew they were in for this. Now, supposedly, after the loss, this mysterious death of Antonin Scalia, and I have ideas on that I'll share if you want me to, is they brought in an Episcopal, Neil Gorsuch, and the Washington Post bragged, the first Protestant in years. Well, isn't this interesting? First of all, as Episcopals, not to offend Episcopals, but look, you guys, your traditions are barely discernible from Catholic traditions. Episcopals, Orthodoxy, the Anglican Church in England, the Church of England, are basically daughters of Roman Catholicism, the same vestments, the same traditions, very little difference. Very, very frequently do we see people jumping from one sect to another, and it's very easy for them to do because they're so similar. Neil Gorsuch is an Episcopal, and Neil Gorsuch was trained by the Jesuits at the very same prep school that Brett Kavanaugh went to, Georgetown Prep. And then he went on to become, he was Episcopal in the same Episcopal diocese, how creepy is this, as the Ramsey family. The father and mother of that poor little girl, Jean-Benet Ramsey, who was dressed up and made up as an adult before she was murdered, and I'm convinced was sexually abused before she was murdered. So
definitely a lot more there than, I think a lot of people suspect, but they just haven't proved it.
Oh, they had no desire to prove it. And I found that a lot of times, and I'm going to come back to Brett Kavanaugh, I found a lot of times, unfortunately, that it's actually pretty rare for a child to be just snatched off the street. It's much more common for that child's family to be involved. And also, this is something to keep in mind for nuclear families, good Christian families. Single-parent families are much more, single mothers are targeted by pedophiles. It's much more common, unfortunately, for families to be involved in the abuse of children.
That makes sense. That goes along with the controversy and the big blow-up out of, was it Baltimore area? When they found out that all of these priests and bishops had taken kids that were brought in and fatherless and put them into like different clubs for basketball and camping and this and that was a perfect opportunity to gain the trust and to be able to molest the the boys in particular.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The vast majority of these situations, I'll tell you, having grown up, I consider myself blessed, insanely blessed to have been both a Boy Scout and an altar boy and to have not been assaulted or abused because, boy, any of these situations, Boy Scouts in particular, Boy Scouts were created by a pedophile, Baden Powell there in England, for the purpose of screening boys for abuse. The same is true for Roman Catholic Jerry Sandusky out of Penn State. He created his Second Mile Foundation as a hub for screening little boys for abuse and then farming them out to powerful insiders. Jerry Sandusky was a Faull guy just like Lawrence King was in Omaha, Nebraska. These are all middlemen. Jeffrey Epstein is a Faull guy, and Donald Trump made sure Jeffrey Epstein didn't even go to jail. Donald Trump personally intervened. Well, actually, Donald Trump's handlers intervened, and Donald Trump rewarded the federal prosecutor who let Jeffrey Epstein off the hook, Alexander Acosta, who's now our Secretary of Labor, thanks to Donald Trump's selection process. So this is the same Donald Trump that selected Brett Kavanaugh, or supposedly selected Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh was selected for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is just the figurehead. Brett Kavanaugh is a Jesuit-trained Roman Catholic, grew up in the Maryland area, and I'll tell you what I've found from this is that there is a whole subculture of traitorous ruling elite that are golfing and drinking champagne and eating caviar and lobster and conducting the most heinous betrayals of the American people once they get empowered. Brett Kavanaugh is a part of that. Brett Kavanaugh is part of that subculture where you have these spoiled, unfortunately, usually Catholic kids. And I don't mean this to attack Roman Catholics in general, but here's the fact: is that everybody involved in this, this play, this show, this circus of the Kavanaugh hearing. The Kavanaugh hearings were carefully scripted from beginning to end. Carefully scripted. Brett Kavanaugh is almost certainly a sexual predator. He's a Jesuit-trained Roman Catholic. He's a ruling elite gatekeeper. Some of the things that Brett Kavanaugh did as an adult is he protected the Affordable Health Care Act, so-called Obamacare. He made sure that it wasn't thrown out in court. He is a gatekeeper along with Ken Starr over the supposed suicide of Vince Foster. He personally helped to write the process of a search warrant, which is let me get it for a second here. It is habeas corpus. Of course, we have to use Latin for that. We use a Latin term, habeas corpus. That's because it's Latin that masks everything that's important. Doctors and lawyers all use the tongue of Rome in order to insulate themselves from the citizenry. Habeas corpus is the idea that if a law enforcement official says they have just cause to examine you and your personal effects and your property, you have to go before a judge and sell a judge on your just cause, and then a judge ratifies whether or not you are correct, and you do have just cause to go through someone's person and personal property. The Patriot Act does away with that. And apparently, according to Andrew Napolitano, another Italian Roman Catholic, Brett Kavanaugh was the guy that helped write out habeas corpus from the Patriot Act. You no longer have to have the oversight of a judge. You can have one agent of any kind and one representative of the United States government simply write a search warrant for another agent of the American government, completely subverting whether or not a judge puts their reputation on the line. That's still abused, but now it's even easier to abuse. I'm one whatever, FBI agent, cop, whatever, and I don't like you, and I've got a buddy, and let me tell you something, loyalty in the ranks is far more important than doing the job. I mean, there are good cops and good agents, but they're all controlled. They know where not to push the line on their ethics. So Brett Kavanaugh is personally responsible for that. Meanwhile, you have these illusions, these mentions of what Brett Kavanaugh was in high school. The reason why this aspect of, I'm sure that Brett Kavanaugh has done much, much worse into adulthood, simply because of the nature of the accusations of what he did in high school. Here's this silver spoon Jesuit-trained brat in the Maryland, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Virginia area. By the way, all that area was founded by Catholics for Catholics. Mary Land, Virginia, Washington, D.C. used to be known as Little Rome on the Potomac. That's why it has a massive phallic obelisk across from a dome, exactly as you have in the sovereign city-state of the Vatican. That's pagan sex magic. Mirror image. A massive phallic monument, supposedly the Washington Monument. That's not what I think of when I look at that. Across from the womb dome of the Capitol, named off after Capitoline Hill, one of the 7 hills of Rome, which is in Revelation. I believe that's Revelation 17. That the 7 tells you explicitly the 7 heads are 7 hills, and the 7 hills of Rome are so obvious that there's even as controlled as Wikipedia is. There's a Wikipedia entry on the 7 hills of Rome, and yet they've been completely written out by of Christian eschatology and prophecy by Jesuits. Jesuits wrote futurism. Jesuits wrote preterism. Futurism is the idea that somewhere down the road the Antichrist will suddenly and magically appear without warning. And preterism is the idea the Antichrist already did appear, and that all prophecies about Jesus are fulfilled. Both written by Jesuits to obscure the obvious hand of Rome, the idea that Rome is the great whore of Babylon, which was known to Christians just a few hundred years ago. So anyway, Brett Kavanaugh is absolutely a gatekeeper. And so what they did was they leaked out selective aspects of what a despicable guy this is. And I mentioned this on my show. How many of us, Chad, how many girls did you fancy in high school that you tried to rape?
That would be a big fat 0.
Yeah, me too. You know, it's really weird. I don't remember fancying any girls that I tried to rape in a drunken spree. It's just a little bit odd. Now, if you examine, this is what we're being allowed to see. Imagine the things that Brett Kavanaugh's done that are being protected. The media is completely run by the Vatican. I'll go through a list. Was about to call up a list of Vatican Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, overt Roman Catholics who have controlled, from William Randolph Hearst to Rupert Murdoch. Both of them, by the way, Knights of Malta. And I have sources. I never call someone a Knight of Malta unless I have a source on it. I'm very careful to do that. This is what they're allowing us to see. Imagine what this guy did that we're not being allowed to see. And a lot of this is going on. They knew that sources like you and I, you guys and myself, would hone in on the fact that he's another Jesuit-trained Roman Catholic. It's too important on them to play this game.
It came out in his testimony or whatever stuff when he went before the Judiciary Committee. I mean, he came out and said that, he was in a Jesuit school.
Not only that, Chad, he's also on record as saying whatever happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown Prep. Did you get that soundbite? Look that one up. It's fun. So this is what the Jesuits teach. Let's see. Part of these other, this is what we've been allowed to see is his Georgetown Prep yearbook, graduating yearbook entry. Keg City Club treasurer, 100 kegs or bust. I may have done a party or two in high school. I don't know about 100 kegs or bust, but given the number of times that as a young teenager we've heard about his exploits, I'm deeply concerned. Then there's a mention of, let's see here. Oh yeah, Devil's Triangle. You know what the Devil's Triangle is? Well, supposedly, according to him, it's a drinking game. But according to all other sources, It's an allusion to three-way sex, where you have two males and one female. Are you kidding me? This is what this young man is writing in his high school yearbook? Okay? Trying to rape a girl that he liked and then bragging about three-way sex?
And supposedly he was a virgin.
Oh, I'm sure.
Remember that? He said he couldn't have done that. He was a virgin.
Another small, 2 words, Renate alumnus. Renate alumnus is bragging about having had sex with one of these well-known party girls. So this is, I mean, you've only allowed like, five sentences, and all of this stuff that he's writing in his yearbook is this? Are you kidding me? What a depraved little monster. That's just the high school yearbook. What are we supposed to believe? That after high school, this teenager suddenly became a good man? Where did the discipline come from? It certainly wasn't in high school. And here you are, again, with this subculture of ruling elite Roman Catholics. This silver spoon, pardon my, and again, I'm trying not to attack Catholics in general, just Catholic leadership. But it really is. When you see the number, I pulled this up. Draining the swamp. Donald Trump draining the swamp. Donald Trump trained by the Jesuits for 2 years at Fordham, but then he left Fordham so that his degree would come from Public University of Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, I have a source that says even the University of Pennsylvania is secretly controlled by the Jesuits. Go through the alumni of the University of Pennsylvania, and it's just as shocking as the alumni of Georgetown, the college. The number of Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics that Donald Trump has filled the swamp with are shocking. Stephen Bannon, who helped to run his candidacy, Jesuit-trained devout Roman Catholic, visited the Pope in 2014, and member of and former what did he do? He's at Goldman Sachs. What did he do at Goldman Sachs? He was, I don't have it here, but like press agent, powerful Goldman Sachs guy, and eventually went to Hollywood. All those connections: Hollywood, Goldman Sachs, Jesuit-trained Roman Catholic, and papal audience. Brett Kavanaugh, the National Review from William F. Buckley, Skull and Bones Roman Catholic CIA guy. William F. Buckley, National Review, posted an article about what a great conservative warrior Brett Kavanaugh was. And the picture was of Brett Kavanaugh in a papal audience. How did he manage to see the Pope? That's because he was selected to be on in the George Bush administration. The picture that National Review has up is with Brett Kavanaugh shaking Pope St. John Paul II's hand in a very weird way, too. I know a lot of people consider that a Freemasonic handshake, although, honestly, I have to say I don't think Pope St. John Paul knew exactly where he was at the moment. But anything is possible with George Bush clearly in the background. These people have always run. I've got, I think, a New York Times article how George Bush was one of the most Catholic presidents of all time. Meanwhile, he's supposedly an evangelical Protestant, right? Same thing with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, who was born and baptized Roman Catholic by his Knight of Columbus father. Same thing with Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, born and baptized Roman Catholic. All of these supposed evangelical conservatives have a surprising connection to Rome. So, and Brett Kavanaugh, the warrior, the conservative warrior, I have made the prediction, and I feel really, really sound about it. And I'm going to make a second prediction. My first prediction was Donald Trump will deal with illegal immigrants and so-called, in his words, build a wall as fast as Barack Obama fulfilled his promise to get rid of Guantanamo Bay. I will also make the prediction that the Supreme Court, at the same time that Donald Trump builds a wall, the Supreme Court will throw out the abomination that is Roe v. Wade. Never. It is the Catholic Church that has empowered, that has caused the slaughter of the unborn to happen. Catholic Church, the most powerful religion anywhere, supposedly passionately for the unborn, and at no place in any situation, in any government governed by overt Roman Catholics, do you have a single victory for the unborn. I'll use this as an example. There was an ordained Jesuit priest who overtly served in Congress, Robert Drinan, in Massachusetts, a congressman. Robert Drinan was a far-left, pro-abortion Democrat. The only Jesuit to ever serve openly in Congress was a far-left, pro-abortion Democrat, replaced by Jewish homosexual Barney Frank. Okay? So the Catholic Church is a mega fraud on abortion and instituted abortion and will protect it in the same way that it instituted and has protected Obamacare. And Brett Kavanaugh is personally responsible for that. Brett Kavanaugh had an opportunity to help tear Obamacare down and instead kept it up. The good conservative warrior, Brett Kavanaugh. So the purpose for this PSYOP, Kay and Chad, was to fleece good Americans into pulling for this fraud. They allowed portions of the very things that should have had us up in arms to leak out in order to defuse it. And here, like fools, we see all these far left, I have slang that I use, libtard and commitard. We see all these far left sources being extreme and shrill and attacking this guy in what appears to be unfair attacks. And it's all carefully manipulated to play us into supporting him and us being for his rise to the Supreme Court. At no point will Americans receive any benefit from it. Just the opposite. And in a way, look how many good... The Supreme Court has been run by the pseudo-right of Catholics. John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Antonin Scalia, former Monsanto lawyer Clarence Thomas. Also, his Senate hearings were focused on whether or not he was a sexual predator. And another devout Roman Catholic. You're seeing a consistency here with these people in power. And the reason why is because as sexual predators, they're also blackmailed as sexual deviants. So they will always toe the line.
Johnny, looking back on it also, the last time that I remember was Clarence Thomas, where it just, it was everywhere you turned. The hearings were on TV. Okay, then that settled down. And then recently we've had where women and men are accusing Hollywood actors, countless.
Great one. Yep. Great. I can go into that. You bet. And that is another carefully laid psychological operation.
Well, that's what I thought because, that happened. And then we've got Kavanaugh. So it was like that piece of puzzle with Kavanaugh fits very nicely in with the Hollywood scene.
Yeah, but before even both of those got started, what were they talking about? They were talking about all the sex scandals with the Vatican. In fact, what was it? Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor. What was it? Pope Francis actually ended the investigation into him because he was one of the ones that basically helped get the current Pope elected. Right. And go ahead.
Let me close this out. I have 40 more. I covered one name on my list. I have 40 more names of Roman Catholics or Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics or Goldman Sachs people that I wanted to throw out. It's not worth it. But Branstad, Bremberg, Chow, Cohen, Coney Barrett, Conway, DeVos, Betsy DeVos, sister of Eric Prince, devout Roman Catholic and founder of Blackwater. Oh my goodness. Dunford, Joseph Dunford, Marine Corps General, Michael Thomas Flynn, Army General. Of course, we all know Flynn, Gibson, Gorka, Gorsuch, Kellogg, Kelly, Kudlow, Leitzer, Mattis, unmarried Marine Corps General, secret Roman Catholic. Scary. The list goes on and on and on. I wanted to throw that out there before I close this spreadsheet out.
Yeah, but also, and another thing that also was really that I took a lot of issue with was whenever the Pope made the comment that making these sexual allegations or even talking about them, he basically said that you are doing the work of Satan. It's like, really?
Well, this Pope is a fall guy. There is no reason to have installed a Jesuit as what we call the white Pope. We differentiate between the white Pope and the black Pope. The real power comes from the superior general, who's called the black Pope because of the supposed humble priestly black cassock that he wears, but also as an allusion to his all-encompassing and evil malignant power. The superior general is the real power between the two. There's no reason to force Joseph Ratzinger out of the papacy, first time in 600 years, in order to install a Jesuit Pope, unless the purpose is to make this Jesuit Pope a fall guy and then have him die or resign and everybody goes back to sleep. He is purposefully doing and saying things to upset people so that he can become a target, and that once he leaves or is forced out or whatever is the way they're going to script him to leave, we all go back to sleep and they all go back to their systems. They have a thorough, total control without a Jesuit being the overt white Pope. Many Catholics hate this guy. Many Catholics. He's made statements about Satan. He's made statements about marriage and gun control and on and on. He's just upset a lot of people, and he's doing it on purpose. As a matter of fact, shortly after he became Pope, he said, I don't expect to live another 2-3 years. Look that up.
I remember that.
Pope says, I don't expect to live 2-3 years. Why would he say that? Well, he said that because he's a fall guy. He's part of a massive psychological operation so that when he leaves, they might even script him to die, and he doesn't really die. But when he leaves, we're all supposed to say, oh, boy, I'm so glad that guy is gone. Now we can go back to everything was good and right before that. Meanwhile, everything was not good and right, and it's just gotten worse. So, but this Me Too movement is all a carefully planned psychological operation. We shorten that and call it a psyop, in which the real issue, the real problem, is the fact that power is based on sexual predation, particularly of children, but also of women and children. And this is being allowed to manifest and be seen in Hollywood because Hollywood is the most visible and yet the least powerful of these venues. That's why there are so many overt Jews like Harvey Weinstein running things in Hollywood. You don't see a Harvey Weinstein at the Pentagon. You don't see a Harvey Weinstein in the CIA or the FBI. Those are all Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics. The token, perfect example, is the token Jew surrounding Donald Trump. It's his son-in-law. Remind me of this kid's name? No purpose for him whatsoever. No purpose for him. What they actually created a group for him to lead, Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner. The kid has absolutely no purpose. Meanwhile, the Huffington Post is claiming that he's all-powerful. He didn't even have a position. Is he Secretary of Defense? Is he Director of the CIA? Director of the FBI? No, these are all positions that are usually reserved for Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics. It's all a figure. It's all a game. It's all a psyop. So this thing in Hollywood, it's all part of a propaganda movement. The Me Too thing is propaganda to change the focus from sexual predators of any kind to men versus women and male chauvinism and misogyny. And there is some truth to it, but it's absolutely not the top. It's what they do. They leak out the partial truth to distract people with. Harvey Weinstein absolutely is a male misogynist pig that forced particularly pretty girls to do things for him in order to be seen in a movie. No doubt about it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And nothing really happened to him. He was arrested on a single count of rape in New York City, not in Los Angeles, and immediately released on bail. What happened to Harvey Weinstein? Nothing. And he's the fall guy, and he hasn't even really fallen. You look at a guy like Roman Polanski. Monster. A Jew raised Roman Catholic is Roman Polanski, who raped and sodomized a 13-year-old girl at Jack Nicholson's mansion. And when he found out the judge was actually going to hold him accountable because he was on another loose bail, just like Harvey Weinstein is, he went to France, where it's acceptable to rape a 13-year-old girl. It's so acceptable that a rape case in France of an 11-year-old girl was thrown out because the judge decided she wanted it. No exaggeration. Look it up. That's where Roman Polanski sits to this very day, free of any molestation, no pun intended, by law enforcement, either French or American. So it's all a psychological operation to distract. And these, I still got you guys, right? Check test?
Yeah,
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, I frequently have these issues with my audio crapping out, so I just want to make sure I kept you. What they do is they use spokespeople. I just wrote an in-depth article on this. It's the top article, When Laughing Pedophiles Lead You to Corrupt Cops. They choose for the spokespeople of this movement, this Me Too movement of, it's the male misogynist pigs in Hollywood. No, it's not. Both genders, all three genders, I'm making a joke there. Actually, it's not a joke because one of the spokespeople is actress Rose McGowan. And Rose McGowan is dating, what do they call her? She is dating now. She used to date Satan worshiper Marilyn Manson. She left Marilyn Manson and is now dating, it is a gender non-binary partner. So these are the spokespeople for the Me Too movement. Rose McGowan and her gender non-binary partner, Rain Dove. Because these are, and again, I'm speaking to our overtly Christian audience. It is a satanic agenda to muddy the waters on gender identity. It's very important to them because it's sexually perverse, and sexual perversion is helpful. Sexual perversion leads to lust. Lust helps people to disconnect from their duty, from their logical thought, from their morality. And also, a strong male or a strong female is more dangerous to this machine than a weakened male or weakened female, particularly an effeminate male. Is far less of a threat. So they have this Me Too movement, and they put up people like Rose McGowan or Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence, who admitted to press that she happily stripped as a teenage girl. Now, what was leaked to the press was she stripped for a female producer and nothing happened. That was what was leaked. Now, if you question the press, the next question is, okay, what did you really do? I don't know. Look back at Jennifer Lawrence's career and see how many times she's been happy to strip on camera. Look up Jennifer Lawrence. Just type in Jennifer Lawrence to Google, the search engine that has the same birthday as the Jesuits, September 27th. That's just a coincidence. Type in for an image search of Jennifer Lawrence, and how many pictures come up are risque. Many of them. So clearly Jennifer Lawrence is okay with using her body to get where she is. And then they turn around and act righteously indignant against men. And I've mocked them. There is a pretty young actress, Ana de Armas. Ana de Armas. is a Brazilian actress who got a starring role in Blade Runner 2049. So she tweeted, "Women of Brazil, I stand with you. I want our leaders to protect human rights and say no to violence, no to racism, no to misogyny, no to homophobia, and no to guns. And no Instagram." That was actually what she wrote. She's just not very good at posting. And meanwhile, this is a pretty young girl that has no problem undressing on camera and doing explicit sex scenes. Sadly, she did so for Blade Runner 2049. Although it wasn't an explicit sex scene, it was partial nudity for the movie. So I had to mock her on Twitter for this. And I said, absolutely. Ana de Armas stands with you, women of Brazil. Never again should you have to use your body to get ahead. Never again should you have to sleep your way into power. But do as I say, not as I do. So they put these flawed women as the faces and names of the Me Too movement, and then they tear them apart. Another one is Asia Argento, born in Italy, to Dario Argento, the famed Italian horror writer, director, producer. And she's a friend, apparently, of Rose McGowan, and part of the Me Too movement. They're all involved. And then it was leaked by Rose and her non-binary partner, Rain Dove, that Asia Argento is in trouble because she had an affair with a teenage boy. Okay. So here the Me Too movement seems to be disintegrating. Meanwhile, the real truth is much darker than that. Turns out this young man was with Asia when he was 7 years old in her movie. And the movie, I write about this in my article, in my column, just really creepy, evil movie. And the little boy in the book, and I don't know if the movie, I haven't seen the movie and I'm not about to. In the book the movie is based on, same title, taken from Jeremiah. Let's see. The heart is deceitful above all things. Isn't that cute? So in the movie, this little boy is born illegitimately to his mother, in and out of orphanages. His mother comes, takes him back, subjects him to a life of drugs and prostitution. He is eventually sexually assaulted, sodomized, raped by men. Works the streets in the book, and I guess in the movie is wears a dress, forced to wear a dress. Little boy wears a dress and is sexually assaulted as a result by men. Great movie, absolutely the type of movie you want named after a Bible verse. Absolutely. And this is what Asia Argento was involved in. And this very young man, supposedly 10 years later, they finally have an affair. Meanwhile, Rose McGowan claims that he's sending her nude photos as a 12-year-old. Okay? Then you go online and you look at Asia Argento's Instagram, which I've done, and I've put several posts, really creepy, questionable, including with her own son, Nicola. There's one Instagram in my article where she, and they're clothed, she's in bed with him in a staged photograph. He's awake, and he's wearing what looks like a dress.
Ew.
Are you kidding me? So this is, now after all this, Rose McGowan eventually tweeted out, sorry, it's a mistake. I'm sorry for accusing her. Oh, and by the way, both Rose and Asia show evidence of childhood sex abuse and trauma themselves. Identity issues, emotional tantrums in public, obsessions with tattooing, a parent's addiction to sex, particularly perverted sex. These are all behaviors that are indicative of sexual abuse. How many other people can we talk about that did this? Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus. These are all women, girls, who show evidence of abuse and trauma. And very often, the victims of abuse are rewarded by their willingness to be abused by a position of notoriety.
Lindsay Lohan would be a good example, too.
Another great example. These are not well-adjusted young women. That's because they were abused. That's because they were seduced with power. Seduced with power. They were allowed to become singers and actresses because they did not vehemently rebel against their abuse. And as a reward, and unfortunately, sadly, this is not the plight of most victims. Most victims get thrown away, but occasionally a victim will be rewarded for allowing their assaults, their exploitation, by being empowered. Another example that comes to mind is Joaquin Phoenix. River Phoenix, that whole family was part of a child sex cult. And Joaquin Phoenix was, he died as a result of being given supposedly a cocktail, a weird cocktail. He was supposedly on drugs and then given alcohol.
You mean River?
River, yeah. Isn't that what I said, River Phoenix?
No, you said Joaquin.
Joaquin betrayed his brother, River. That whole family was involved in a child sex cult. River died in Johnny Depp's bar. Now, the story is that I doubt. I covered this in my book, Eaters of Children. The story is that he was doing drugs, and then the alcohol he drank that night was adversely reacted to, and he had heart failure. I think he was sacrificed. And the fact that particularly his brother and his mother don't get into the crimes committed against River, that's why Joaquin has been rewarded with a Hollywood career, a continued Hollywood career. Now I understand he's being cast as the Joker after Jared Leto's abysmal appearances as the Joker. Jared Leto, another guy, both prominent in music and as an actor. And I don't know the details on Jared, but he just looks like that poor guy is deeply immersed in the sexual deviancy of the industry. Deeply immersed in it. I'm just watching. The Netflix is so thoroughly controlled by Roman Catholics, Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics on the board at Netflix. Everything that Netflix plays, they have an ulterior motive promotion. And what is it? Alexander. Colin Farrell and Alexander. Jared Leto's in that. And Jared Leto plays Colin Farrell's Alexander's homosexual lover. And does it very well, by the way. I'm surprised that Jared is actually a pretty good actor. He wells up with tears at the loss of his homosexual lover when he gets married to a woman. It's sick. It's scary and it's sick. But I also respect the fact that here's a rock singer who's actually a decent. But you don't get those kind of breaks because you're good. You get those kind of breaks because you're willing. And then if you just happen to be talented at the same time, boy, that's a great combination for you. Willing to abuse and to be abused, and also is good at your job. And boy, that's it, man. One of my favorite actors, Michael Fassbender, is on record as at least experimenting with bisexuality. Tom Hardy, another one, experimented with homosexuality. Accomplished actors, but most of them, if I'm not mistaken, both Michael and Tom raised Catholic, I'm pretty sure. So this is how you get ahead. This is how you get ahead. So, Chad, I hope I answered this for you. This whole thing is part of a carefully scripted movement of distraction. And Chad, the way they do it is to hook you with snippets of the truth. Snippets only. And then they allow a little piece of the truth. They say, hey, you know what? You're right. There are sexual predators in Hollywood, but they're really male misogynist pigs. And then they throw one to the curb seemingly. They might even, it's actually unheard of for an arrest to occur. But what happened after the arrest, as we said earlier? Nothing. Did Harvey go to jail? No. No more than any Roman Catholic priest. And by the way, guys, this proves who's in charge. This proves that the Catholic religion is an insurgency. And I have this copiously cited and referenced in my book, Eaters of Children. In every single case that a pedophile priest is brought to the attention of his superiors, he is carefully coddled and enabled. He is quietly moved. They never act until a Catholic parishioner complains. And the Catholic parishioner almost never goes to the police or the prosecutors or social services. They go to their clergy, which clearly shows, at best, they're not seeing clearly. If a priest raped my little boy or little girl, I would probably go to jail because of what I would do. Certainly, I would absolutely be going to police. The last thing I would do is go to the bishop and complain. And each and every time they do, go ahead. You want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. Remember that whenever they would go to the police, what did the police do? They called. They called somebody within the Vatican or the church. They would have bishops come in, and they would sit down, and they would question these people, and then they would decide that they didn't want to press charges.
A shockingly accurate movie, although it is propaganda, is Spotlight. 2015 movie with Michael Keaton, Liev Schreiber. Spotlight it's still propaganda, but it's an excellent movie.
Yeah.
The propaganda is that the Boston Globe did its job, and this only happened in Catholic Boston. That's the propaganda. It's absolutely untrue. The Boston Globe was allowed to do its job, carefully scripted to do its job, and that's the same scene that takes place in every city. And it's exactly what happened, Chad. You just described the opening scene that's depicting real life in the movie Spotlight in regards to John Gagan, a serial child-raping priest. And what happened? The good Roman Catholic assistant prosecutor came into the police station and said, hey, what's going on? The bishop's in talking to the mother right now. You stay out here. He'll just be a few more minutes. Are you kidding me? How about if I put you all in a jail cell? That's what I should be doing as my job. And instead, the cops and prosecutors and judges took direction from the Catholic clergy. Proves my point. Who really runs America?
Yeah, there was one here recently that basically they had. I mean, the evidence was overwhelming. And what happened? He fled back to the Vatican. At the end of the movie, the chief, and by the way, the accusations are never allowed to be against bishops and cardinals and popes. The accusations are only at the priest level. Where did these bishops and cardinals come from? Is there no such thing as a pedophile that graduates the bishop and cardinal and pope? Absolutely. As we're seeing now is the accusations against Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, who willingly covered up pedophilia. The end of the movie tells you in text that the worst, basically this is criminal collusion. The RICO Act is when you have a conspiracy to cover up a crime. And that's exactly what Cardinal Bernard Law did in Boston.
is conspired to take these monsters, these child-raping monsters, and enabled them, quietly moved them when anger welled up about one monster in one diocese. He quietly moved them to a new diocese where the families had no idea who was coming in, where he can now rape anew and again. Are you kidding me? They both should be in a cell awaiting sentencing, and that's not what occurred. And it tells you at the end of Spotlight, as after a full career as the Archbishop of the Boston Diocese, the Boston Archdiocese, Cardinal Bernard Law retired in Rome and had a very, very comfortable retirement, champagne and caviar. And it actually upset, I have a couple of news articles, how people were upset at the way that Cardinal Law was living. The same thing with George Pell.
And there's a key reason why they do go to Rome is because they can't be extradited.
Because Rome is a sovereign city-state with its own laws, its own police, its own jail, its own money, its own stamps, just like Washington, D.C., just like London.
That's why Ratzinger is still there. They know that if he leaves there, he is going to be arrested also for the pedophilia.
He's at risk of it. He's certainly at risk of it. I'm sure that they're going to do their best to corrupt any of the police and judges that might be doing the arresting, but he's absolutely at risk for it. Mm-hmm. And so Bernard Cardinal Law died late last year, and guess who blessed his funeral? The Pope himself. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Francis I, blessed the casket. Job well done, Bernard Law. Are you kidding me? This guy was personally responsible for maximizing the rape of children. Not just doing nothing, but making sure it happened again and again and again. And this is just one diocese, one archdiocese. This is exactly what goes on. This is exactly what gets played over and over and over again. Can you consider a series of crimes, a network of criminal behavior, any more severe? There's not a member of ISIS, there's not a member of the KGB, there's not a member of any of America's enemies who have done this much damage than the careful, systematic rape of our children. To cover it up, to enable it, and make sure it goes on and on and on. That is a war crime. It's a war crime. And it has never been addressed as such. That's because our own federal intelligence agency, our own federal investigation agency is run by Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics. The first thing the FBI does when a massive crime comes in is to come in and obscure the evidence and cover it up. How is our own agencies are our worst enemies? The CIA, trafficking in drugs, slave trafficking, dumping drugs on American streets, victimizing innocent Americans in mind control experiments, and I've got mainstream sources on that. Are you kidding me? The KGB has never done that. ISIS, Al-Qaeda have never done anything that severe. The CIA and the Vatican, one and the same, are America's most dangerous enemies. And you wonder why 200 years ago it was illegal for a Roman Catholic to vote. That's because Roman Catholics in general who were not politically active went to the bishop and asked for who do they vote for. They vote for people like Donald Trump. And they would have won had Hillary Clinton got in office. You get two choices, both of them carefully controlled. They won with Barack Obama. Barack Obama was a victim of child sex abuse from Frank Marshall Davis, who was probably his father. From a thoroughly controlled CIA family, and Barack Obama trained by the Jesuits like Greg Galuzzo about how to be a communist community organizer in Chicago, a city owned by the Catholic Church. And that's from the New York Times. So.
Wow. Well, there is one thing, Johnny, that I want to bring up with this. We have left out one key person, and that's Bill Cosby.
Good question. Now, Bill Cosby made his name on clean Christian comedy. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, he was at best a date rapist, a serial date rapist, using drugs and so forth, and his power. Here's what I've seen. At no point, the only time someone is addressed by media or law enforcement is because they somehow are not towing the line. Now, I don't know exactly. I've heard a rumor that Bill Cosby drew the line at the sacrifice of his son. I've heard a rumor, I cannot substantiate this, that the murder of his son was actually a ritual sacrifice. And he was called upon to sacrifice another child and possibly his wife as well. And he supposedly drew the line at that. And so therefore, the machine has turned around and done what they do to keep people in line. You do not get empowered unless they have ways to keep you in line. For instance, Donald Trump is a serial child rapist, and he's almost certainly had sex with his own daughter, Ivanka. Look up Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, inappropriate. And you will see all kinds of, if you do a general search, you'll come up with creepy audio, creepy interviews where Donald Trump talks about sex and his daughter at the same time. Creepy pictures of Donald Trump groping her as a little girl.
It's disgusting. It is. I've seen it. I've read it.
And so you don't get to become president of the United States unless you've got that many things that you're ashamed of. And that's what keeps you in line. And supposedly the story is that Bill Cosby attempted to rebel, and this is what happens to anyone who has been empowered by the machine. They crack down on you. They take the very things that they expect will keep you in line, your dirt, your skeletons in your closet, and they hammer you with them. Now, I constantly preach on my audio that someday Bill Cosby has not really rebelled. Bill Cosby has not outed anyone. Someday, someone of courage, particularly now, again, I'm very grateful for the fact that you guys are born-again Christians and your audience is primarily Christian. I don't have to give the disclaimer to a general secular audience I usually give, that someone in a position of power will come to Christ, and they will be emboldened by that, and they will throw caution to the wind to include whatever it is they've been blackmailed upon, and they will take a stand, and they will out this evil. And it's a house of cards, and it will crumble. They cannot do what they have done overtly. They have to continue to conduct these propaganda psychological operations. They have to continue to convince American citizens that their police do their jobs, judges do their jobs. Donald Trump is an outsider. Their congressmen, their senators actually got elected, not selected. Even their police chiefs and sheriffs, they're all is a good chance that they're good people who will do their job. Meanwhile, there's no chance at the national level, almost no chance at the state level, and very little chance at the local level that people in positions of power and authority will do the right thing. At the bare minimum, that they'll do the right thing. And there's an excellent likelihood that they're even worse than that they're thoroughly co-opted, corrupted criminals themselves. Whenever you see an arrest of a pedophile, it's someone who's outside of the accepted system of child sex slave trafficking. The real pedophiles are cops, FBI agents, CIA agents, all the way to the top. Those are the ones really doing the child sex slave trafficking. And any investigation that doesn't go after bishops, cardinals, CIA directors, presidents, secretaries, congressmen, senators is a fraud. Is a psyop, is a propaganda affair. Where, I mean, even if you really are cynical like I am, you see these reports of, like a friend just sent me a report of the U.S. Marshals are finding 123 children in trafficking. I don't trust that. I don't believe you, because it's the United States government agencies that are doing the trafficking. I don't trust any of these arrests. I've seen so many ridiculous reports. Hundreds of pedophiles being arrested. Really? I don't believe that. And until I see people like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump who have personally visited Jeffrey Epstein's orgy island, and they all have islands. They all have these islands. What's his name? Branson, Mr. Virgin Records, and his island that he's got. They all have these islands where they're free from oversight.
Well, not just that, but also the politicians were going into orphanages and stuff like that, like Boys Town, taking these children out.
The worst example is Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile was invited to go into Catholic orphanages, Catholic hospitals, Jimmy Savile being a devout Roman Catholic himself, and stay overnight to rape children, rape them again and again and again. Same thing with other high-profile not prime ministers, but prime ministers are involved, ministers of parliament, congressmen, senators. As a matter of fact, that was just part of what you mentioned, Chad, part of the Omaha, Nebraska scandal, which is wrongfully misnamed the Franklin cover-up. That's because the man who was used for the propaganda of that misnaming, John DeCamp, a devout Roman Catholic, who was almost a Catholic priest himself, and a personal friend of CIA director and devout Roman Catholic Bill Casey, who was personally told, I've got the interview audio, where John DeCamp admits that Joseph Ratzinger, when he was prefect for the Inquisition is the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. It was just renamed. It was never disbanded. The Inquisition goes on to this very day. And Joseph Ratzinger was the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, spoke to John DeCamp twice, once as the leader of the Inquisition and once as Pope. And John DeCamp admitted that Joseph Ratzinger asked him to address the child sex slave ring in Omaha, Nebraska. And the source, the name of that scandal should have been the Boys Town cover-up, not the Franklin cover-up. Franklin was the federal credit union that fall guy puppet middleman Lawrence King worked at. It had nothing to do with the trafficking. The children came from the Boys Town orphanage. That was the source of the victims. Why wasn't that the name of the scandal? And these little boys were being taken from Omaha, Nebraska, and flown to Washington, D.C. to be raped by congressmen and senators and presidents and vice presidents. So this is how they do it. And the Catholic Church, the Vatican, run by the Jesuits, is in the ultimate control. And again, I don't want to insult Catholics. And Catholics, I'm very pleased when Catholics are outraged over this stuff, but you guys have to give it up. You guys have to give up on fixing the system. The system is thoroughly wrong.
There's also been a couple of Catholic orphanages that they've actually uncovered the bodies of numerous children. I know one in particular that they said that they found, the bodies of over 200 children?
There's one that comes to mind, Tuon, in Ireland. There was an orphanage.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Tuon, Ireland. Over 800 bodies of babies were found in the septic system.
That's the one I was thinking of right there.
800 bodies of babies. And what they would do is they would bring in young girls who got into trouble and who were pregnant, and they would give the little girls would give birth, and the babies who were not sold were murdered. Many of them were sold, and I list that in Eaters of Children. This was actually even more sick. Even more sick is the example in Spain with Franco, devout Roman Catholic, and was it Escriba? Is the priest who created Opus Dei, was his confidant, was his confessor, and they created a child slave trade. And they actually stole babies all the way through into the 1980s is what they admitted. They probably still do it to this very day. But they admitted into the 1980s where a woman would give birth and they tell her, I'm sorry, your baby died. Meanwhile, the baby was stolen and sold, sometimes to predator pedophiles.
Yeah, and it doesn't just end there. Like you said, you got the orphanages, we got these the Catholic orphanages and all over the place. But then I know that one of the interviews that me and Kay did with the Caricos, because they've worked with these children that are been affected by SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and one of the things that their investigation led to was something called the Blue House. And the Blue House was basically like a daycare center. And they were doing the same thing in daycare centers, where they were going in and they were taking children out of these daycare centers and sexually abusing them. And
they allow that information to get out, Chad, because it distracts. It's the middle portion of this evil system, of the structure. So, Chad, you're aware of that. You're infuriated by it. How do you stop it? Who are the Satanists? You can't. That's why it's released. That's why it's released. It's satanic ritual abuse. How do you fight satanic ritual abuse? You don't. Who are the Satanists? Meanwhile, the structure, and I liken this to devout Roman Catholic John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. You wonder why you keep seeing Lord of the Rings again and again and again and again. That's because he's a good devout Roman Catholic. Same thing with Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. How many times have you seen Sherlock Holmes? A good Freemasonic Roman Catholic. Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, named after the founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius Loyola. I liken it to a Lord of the Rings scenario. Sauron is nebulous until he starts to form, until his body comes together. The structure of Sauron is the Catholic Church. The structure, the leadership, bishops, cardinals, the structure that is these conspiracies and these criminal behaviors. If you wanted to stop the systemic pedophilia, you go after the Catholic Church. You go after these criminals who conduct these abuses again and again and then run back to Rome where they cannot be prosecuted. That is why you're allowed to focus. The real Satanists are in Rome. And that's from Roman sources. That's from Catholic sources. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of a good Catholic priest who talked about the satanic rituals in the Vatican. It'll come to me. Basically a Catholic whistleblower. I know that gee whiz, I want to say Malachi Martin was saying that. Yes, Malachi Martin said that his friend Pope Paul VI was worried about Satanists running the Vatican. Meanwhile, they're in the thick of it themselves. Jimmy Savile, devout Roman Catholic, would pray to Satan in Latin as he raped children. One of his victims recounted that. So the real SRA abusers are Roman Catholic clergy. But you're not allowed to see that. You're just given this nebulous idea. That's why this clown, United States Army Colonel Michael Aquino, is brought up again and again by people like Fiona Barnett. Okay, so number one, he's in no danger whatsoever of being arrested. Number two, he's drooling on himself with his oxygen tank sitting next to him, so he's got no active part today. And number three, he's a middleman, a clown, just like Jeffrey Epstein, just like Lawrence King. They're middlemen, and they're safe from being prosecuted. Lawrence King was never prosecuted on child sex trafficking. Lawrence King was prosecuted on embezzling $40,000 from Boys Town. Did you know that? Lawrence King was never prosecuted on child sex slave trafficking, and he's the fall guy from the so-called Franklin cover-up. But because he stole and abused funds from Boys Town, that's why he was in. One of his victims got more time in jail than he did.
Well, then he was lucky because a vast majority of them didn't even survive. The ones that came out and started exposing a lot of that and talking about it, they wound up dead. Troy Boner died in a hospital in New Mexico. Alicia Owen, another victim that escaped, was given 25 years for perjury. Are you kidding me?
25 years for trying to whistleblow on those monsters who raped her. One of them was the chief of police. Meanwhile, Lawrence King got 15 years for embezzlement. I'm telling you, it's very close to the time of likening to Jesus in the temple, flipping tables. It's coming up. And the way we're going to do it is to encourage these people on the inside to have heart. Particularly, do you want your soul back? There are many, many people who have been involved in this, who hate themselves, who are very displeased with what they're doing, and feel trapped, feel like they're going to get the Cosby treatment. But I promise you, especially if you have the courage to come to Jesus Christ, you will be protected. There will be consequences, but you will be protected. Put yourself in the hands of Jesus Christ, and no one can snatch you out of his hands. And that's how the house of cards is going to start to come crashing down. This information, we're doing our part here, but the real damage is going to be done from the inside. And then we're going to get some help. And then we're going to come help them. And that's how it's going to, because it's so ripe. The corruption. Watch that movie Spotlight and expand that corruption to every city and to Washington, D.C. It's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating. And by the way, to prove the lie that the Boston Globe did their job, John Gagin is one of, 3 Catholic priests that were ever defrocked for being pedophiles. I know of only 2, Gagin and one other. Pardon me. I know of 2 Catholic priests who were actually defrocked. Gagin was defrocked in 1998. The Boston Globe didn't start their investigation until 2001. He was already in prison. So the propaganda of that movie is that they actually do their job. They don't. Not the Boston Globe, not the Washington Post. As a matter of fact, that's where the star of the movie, Jewish Martin Barron, went from the Boston Globe to the Washington Post, where it works today. That's why guys like John Podesta have their own column at the Washington Post. It's all controlled. And the only time we're allowed to see any part of the truth is when that is selectively allowed to come out. Like, we'll use the Kavanaugh as an example. Here's a guy bragging about 3-way sex, trying to rape girls, his sexual conquests, his keg parties as a teenage boy. What has he done since then? We don't know. He's straightened up and flew straight and narrow ever since. Are you kidding me? A would-be rapist suddenly is no longer a would-be rapist? No. That's how you get to the Supreme Court, is to have some really evil skeletons in your closet so that when it comes time for you to do something you're not comfortable with, they just pull that out or they give you the Cosby. That's how it works. Everyone in power. But people pull for people like Donald Trump. I'm like, are you kidding me? That guy is about as much an insider as Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. Not at all. Not at all an outsider. He's as much an insider as they are. He's not in the slightest bit an outsider. Why is it that you only get 2 choices every year for president? Because they're very carefully selected. The corruption wins no matter who you think you choose. Don't get involved in that. Get involved in outing them, angering people over what they've done. What has Donald Trump done for the American people? He's not fulfilled a single one of his promises. Oh, I'm sorry. Fox News says Merry Christmas now. We didn't say that with Barack Obama. Wow. Wow, what substance. So.
It's pathetic.
It's pathetic, and that's what that's why I'm excited to be here with you guys, because we are leading the charge to wake people up, using names, places, and dates for people to look this stuff up on their own and wake up. And when they see this, they look it up for themselves, even though the internet is controlled. Wikipedia, Google, thoroughly controlled. But they can't obliterate the truth. They can only obscure it. And particularly, again, grateful for your Christian audience, if you're in Jesus Christ, you are empowered and unstoppable.
Yes. Amen.
And all you do is ask for the truth, and it will be presented to you. And I'm telling you, the mere fact that we are here in 2018, 501 years after Martin Luther's protest, talking about these topics is because I'm convinced the Lord has had enough. He has allowed these outrages up till now because he's got a plan that we cannot fathom. But fortunately, he's also a God of love and a God of justice and a God of mercy. And the time for flipping tables is coming. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Yes, and he has picked his warriors for this time. And I think all of us that are on the front lines are very blessed to be here at this time.
I would say, here we have, let me use devout Roman Catholic Mel Gibson, who had a Jesuit whispering in his ear. The Passion of the Christ was a very Gnostic Templar Jesuit movie, and yet still is a very worthwhile. I have it. I own it. Because his devout Roman Catholic actor, Jim Caviezel, another good Roman Catholic. I think they did a great job. Even though it's thoroughly Gnostic, Templar, Jesuit, Gnostic portrayal, still powerful. Powerful. You cannot watch that movie and not be, wow, Jesus did that for me. What have I done for him? And this is why I'm here, because I am all in for Jesus Christ, because if I'm not all in for Jesus Christ, I am crushed. I will be crushed instantaneously. This is the most evil, powerful force in the world, and the only force more powerful than the child sex slave, the CIA, the FSB, MI6, the Mossad, all the banks, all the militaries. They all answer to Rome. The only force more powerful than them is Jesus Christ. And being plugged into him, you're invulnerable and invincible. And that's the only reason why I do what I do. And I tell you, I'm amazed anytime I run across, and I've got a couple of them that I collaborate with as non-Christians. I'm like, I wouldn't do what you're doing. Don't try this at home, kids. Unless you have Jesus Christ, and unless you're all in for Jesus Christ, unless you are all in. Live a real Christian life. Don't think that you did an altar call and you're good to go for the rest of your life. A Christian, that's why early Christians, Paul, Peter, John, James, they called it a walk. It is a relationship. It's not an altar call. It is a lifetime relationship. You spend every day in intimacy with Jesus Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit. In prayer, in reading Scripture, in communication, listening to what he tells you to do. And when he tells you to do something painful, you shut up and do it. And I'm saying that from personal experience. The only thing you can do for protection is to go all in for Jesus Christ. And once you're there, you receive the peace that surpasses all understanding. You know that nothing can stop you. But you have to live a real Christian walk. And the foundational part of that is honest self-examination. That's why, Chad and Kay, we have the corner. Christians have the corner on truth investigation. That's because we already live lives that we trained ourselves as Christians to accept the truth no matter how much it hurts. Self-examination is a foundational part of being a Christian. Look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I should not have gone on that website. You know what? I should not have flirted with that beautiful waitress. Whatever the case is. Honest self-examination. Lord, I am sorry. I should not have done that. Forgive me. Give me the strength. I'm going to do my best not to do it again. That is doing that hourly, daily, sometimes minute to minute. Honest self-examination. Fully aware of all your flaws, admitting them, and not lying to yourself to covet them. Acknowledging your flaws, acknowledging how you fell, putting some level of effort into not doing it again. That's the difference. You examine yourself. You don't lie to yourself. You don't pretend that there's some sin that is not really a sin. And that's hard to do. There's everything there's something in every one of us that we secretly like to do, covet. It's what it means to be a human being. There's some level of our flesh that is called to something wrong. Just be honest with yourself. Don't lie to yourself. It's wrong. Okay, you're weak. You fell. Get back up again and put some effort into not doing it again. There's the catch. And that's why Christ says you need to hate your own life in order to truly follow him. Pick up your cross, your instrument of death by torture, and follow him. Because if there's any part of you that you covet more than him, you are not saved. If you allow that wall to be erected between you and Jesus Christ, that wall stays until you're dead, and you never tear that wall down, you are not saved. He's going to say, I never knew you. But Lord, I committed miracles in your name. I never knew you. You pretended that part of your life was closed to me. This is why I used to, when I first got into this stuff, guys, I used to think that I was a failure. I used to think that I could never do the job of a good evangelist. There's nothing more important than winning souls. And now I'm convinced that speaking the truth as I know it actually serves a powerful purpose for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because by speaking the truth that no one else is speaking, unless I'm coming on a great show like yours, I'm actually encouraging Christians to come back to Christ and to live 100% for him, or non-Christians to see how it is that me, crazy Christian that I am, flawed, fleshly Christian that I am, how did I get this information? By living all out for Jesus Christ. How am I protected? Why am I not dead? Why is my computer not crashed? Why have I not had, a car crash? Why have I not, on and on and on, the myriad of things. Why have I not had loved ones have problems and, death and sickness and so forth? And I've had challenges. Trust me, I've had challenges. Nothing has ever in the slightest way dissuaded me because I'm protected. Anything that happens to me is carefully selected by Jesus Christ to refine me with fire. Like I said, put yourself in his hands fully and passionately, not with an altar call, but with a relationship. And no one will snatch you from his hands. You yourself can jump out of his hands if you want to. Not a good idea. You can jump out of his hands, but no one can take you from his hands. And that's what this has done for me. Nothing has convinced me more to go all in for Jesus Christ than this. A passion for the truth and the realization that speaking the truth is the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. There's no other way to do it without Jesus Christ, and with Jesus Christ, you're unstoppable. And that's why I say that eventually, some of these folks on the inside of this machine who hate themselves, can't sleep at night, worried about their soul, worried about the crimes they've committed, are going to throw caution to the wind, and hopefully, on top of that, on top of having the courage to take a stand, are going to accept Jesus Christ as their protection. That's the beginning of the end right there. That is the beginning of the end. And on the outside are going to be Christian warriors like us, unstoppable Christian warriors, to give them a hand and help them. And that's going to be the beginning of the end.
I think this is going to be a good stopping point for us right here.
Sounds good to me. Great upbeat place to stop. It is the beginning of the end. We would not be having this conversation unless the Lord was ready. And I think he is.
That's right. And I'll be in touch with you to get the next session set up.
Kay, you gave me a phenomenal outline. We covered one part of it.
We did.
We still need to talk about Elon Musk and...
Oh, I want to do a whole broadcast on this guy, if that's okay with you too.
China, Theodore McCarrick, Obama, the hurricane victims. There's a whole slew of things. We can go on and on. I am excited to stand by for when you're ready to talk again.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you for
Sure.
being a part of Deception Detection and for being such an awesome Christian brother.
My honor and pleasure.
We appreciate you coming on. So we're going to end this right here, and I'm going to go ahead and say the closing prayer. And everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for all the information that was shared tonight. Thank you for bringing Johnny to us and enlightening us. And Father, we ask that you continue to bring the truth out from your warriors. Help us to expose what's going on and to shine that light. We know that whatever is done in the dark is brought to your light, and that's what we're asking. Please protect us, all the warriors, all the listeners, all the Christian brothers and sisters. Look over them so that they can keep on fighting, Father. Share your word. Let us get that great commission, Father, to share your word throughout the entire world. And again, thank you. Please look after all of our listeners and Johnny and Chad and myself as we go through the week. And I pray this, Father, in Jesus' holy and mighty name. Amen.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
That's going to do it for this week, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We pray that you have a blessed week. Good night, everyone.
No.
In the sky, gazing far into the night, I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light